Medfield TV. Community shows.
My name is Mueller, and I'm a master gardener, and I'm also a farmer. I own Nordland Heritage Farm, and it's a farm in Foster, Rhode Island. We specialize in heritage breeds of livestock. So those are breeds that were traditionally raised in this area, and we actually specialize in critically endangered ones. So we raise things like large black hogs, and there's only 200 breeding pairs registered in the United States right now. And we hope that by raising these old-fashioned heritage animals that we can promote their use for small backyard or small farmers like we are. Because if we don't, we're going to lose the genetic diversity that comes from these animals. I also raise heirloom plants, and I'm going to talk a little bit about why I raise heirloom plants. First of all, what do we mean by heirlooms? And you'll see some pretty heirloom tomatoes there on the screen. Heirlooms are plants and animals that have been passed down from generation to generation. They're typically suited for a microclimate or a specific area. My large black hogs cannot be raised commercially. They can only be raised on a pasture. Their legs will break down otherwise. But they're known for having the tenderest, most juicy meat out of any hog that's raised. So they're typically suited to a particular microclimate, and they're prized for their taste and their performance. Now, heirloom plants are open pollinated, which means that you can collect the pollen to the plant and still have the same seed, the same plant grow the next year. Hybrids, a hybrid is where they take two different plants, they cross them, and you can only collect the seed from the first generation. If you collect that seed again and you plant it, I don't know if you remember Mendel's square, but you'll end up having 25% be like the parents, 25% be different, and then 50% be different. So the plants are open pollinated. The seed can be collected from year to year and planted for the following season. And why grow heirloom plants? Andy Rooney has a great quote. The federal government has sponsored research that it's produced a tomato that's perfect in every respect, except for you can't eat it. He said that this disease is referred to as progress. We should make sure that it doesn't spread. The modern tomato that you buy in the grocery store is bred for uniformity. It's bred for color. Some of them are slightly square, so you can package more of them into a box and ship them. They're bred to ripen off the vine and turn red over a long period of time so you can store them better. They're bred for everything except for taste. So if you've ever had a tomato in January and then you've had a tomato in August, they don't even taste like the same fruit. They're absolutely worlds apart from one another. So why heirlooms? Well, some famous heirlooms have been passed down over hundreds of years, centuries. Some of them just date back to the beginning of this century. What they have in common is that backyard gardeners have prized them for their beauty, their flavor, their productivity, and their fragrance. And that's why they've saved the seed. These are some of the most stellar plants that they have had in their yards. So they've saved the plants, they've cared enough to pass it down to further generations. The best seed of each individual can be used to grow the next generation, and they'll grow true to type. That's what I was talking about. These guys grow true to type. You don't have to worry about having different plants come out of your seed, and they'll adapt to your growing conditions over time. So if you have a tomato that you like, and you pick the very best tomato that you grew that year in the garden, and you save the seed and you plant it next year, more likely than not, you'll have a superior tomato the following year and the following year. As the plants that you pick are the most productive or the best tasting or the best adapted to your particular climate, your yield and your crops will improve. And they can be healthier than the modern hybrids for this reason and have fewer diseases, and the edibles have higher amounts of micronutrients than the modern hybrids. So if heirlooms are so great, why don't we raise them commercially? Well, many types don't ripen all at once, so they can't be harvested mechanically. You can't grow them on a mass scale, send pickers through and pick them all. They don't keep well during shipping and storage. They're more fragile. They ripen on the vine, say, not off the vine. And a lot of them don't have consistent appearances. So you might have a tomato that's all smooth, another one that has a little bit of cat facing, one that's kind of large, one that's kind of small. They're not consistent from tomato to tomato. And people who go to the grocery store want to have perfect tomatoes that all look alike. They don't want to have any variation. And then also they may look a little odd. So these are accordion tomatoes. They're totally delicious. They're wonderful for stuffing. They make great beefsteak tomatoes, but they look a little odd. So somebody may not buy that in the grocery store, or they might not know that green eggplant is perfectly delicious and ripe. So a lot of people don't grow them commercially because they look a little strange. But heirlooms are ideal for home gardeners. Now, the fact that they don't ripen all at once means that you can go out every day and collect some of the vegetables from your garden, just enough for that night's meal. You can extend the harvest over a longer period of time. If they're grown in one locality, the heirlooms will adapt to the climate and the soil conditions over time, and you'll have better plants than your neighbors who aren't collecting their own seed. They may offer greater disease and insect resistance, and you're going to save money because you don't have to go out and buy seeds every year. You're going to have seeds from your own garden. This beautiful corn here is a glass gem corn. Isn't that beautiful? And good looks and history is another reason why you might want to grow heirlooms. Now you see this rainbow of carrots here? If you ask a child to grow a carrot, they almost always will draw an orange carrot for you. But until the celebration of William the Orange's centennial or celebration, carrots were all different colors. But William the Orange, his color was orange, so in Holland that year, they planted all orange carrots in celebration. And so now we all associate carrots with being orange. But historically, they've been grown all different colors. And heirloom plants are a tangible connection to our past. By growing an heirloom, you're connecting to generations that have gone before you. Gardeners and farmers and Native Americans who have prized these plants, it gives you a tangible connection to them. And they've got great stories to tell. Most other wild goose bean was collected from the craw of a goose that was shot in 1864 in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. So someone shot the goose. In the process of cleaning the goose, they found a bean in its craw. They planted it, and they grew this bean. And it's also the same bean that was raised by the corn planter Indians. So there's some great stories to tell behind some of these plants. Anasazi corn, which was found in a Utah cave, is thought to have been in cultivation for over 800 years, older than the United States. And Radiator Charlie's Mortgage Lifter tomato, which I brought some seed of to show you. It's a great, fantastic tomato. He was an auto mechanic who was out of work during the Depression. He had a house, he had to pay it off. He wasn't sure how he was going to do it. He was not a plant breeder, but he came up with an idea that he was going to breed a tomato that was better than every other red tomato, and it was going to be a tomato that could feed a family, and he did just that. And he was so popular that people came from all around to buy his tomatoes, and he paid off his mortgage during the Depression. So these plants, if we lose them, we're going to lose these stories as well. And this is one of the reasons that I actually raise heirloom and heritage animals, is because of the genetic diversity. In the United States, 90% of cattle that are raised are from the same two breeds. If some sort of disease comes along and these animals are susceptible to it, our livestock and our agriculture is going to be wiped out. And it may just be some small cattle breed that survived in a pocket of Appalachia or a corner of New England that has the disease resistance to this disease that could save agriculture for the United States. So it's the same thing with plants. It could be that a plant that isn't a superior garden tomato has some sort of micronutrient in it that could be the cure to cancer, and we just don't know it yet. It could be that some zinnia plant that I grow has a disease resistance that'll revolutionize plant growing for florists. You just don't know. And as we lose our genetic diversity, as we plant these hybrids and these crosses and these modern cultivars, we're losing our genetic diversity and our genetic heritage. And this is something that belonged to all of us. You know, up until about 100 years ago, everybody would have had a garden in their backyard, and they would have been raising a substantial amount of their family's food and a lot of the flowers that graced your table. So by having that be lost to us, we're losing our own heritage and our own diversity. And I have 10 of my favorites that I'm going to share with you. This is a little garden plot. Gardens don't have to be big. And this is one of the things that I say to people when you're starting off with a garden. It's better to start too small. There's never too small. It could be a couple of pots on your patio. It could be a little space right next to your kitchen door where you go in and out. It's better to start small than to start too large and get overwhelmed. This is the Jimmy Nardello frying pepper. The Jimmy Nardello frying pepper is actually a very well-known heirloom. Jimmy Nardello's parents were Giuseppe and Angela Nardiello. It was Nardiello, not Nardello, it was Nardiello. And they emigrated from Italy in 1887. They had a 1-year-old daughter, Anna, and they ended up settling in Naugatuck, Connecticut, where they farmed, and they grew a lot of the plants that they had in Italy. And they named this pepper after their 4th son, Jimmy, because Jimmy was particularly fond of the pepper, and he actually grew it all his life. And at the end of his life, he donated seed from the Jimmy Nardiello, which became over time the Jimmy Nardello frying pepper, to the Seed Savers Exchange. And they saved this pepper. And it has such a wonderful flavor that it was added to the slow food movement's Arc of Taste. Have you heard about the slow food movement? The slow food movement was a reaction to fast food in modern society. It was talking about slowing down, thinking about what you eat and how it's grown and how it connects you to your culture and your past, and trying to preserve some of the genetic diversity and heritage. And so they were looking for particular plants and animals that were superior tasting, flavorful, productive, and they were adding them to their arc of taste. And this is one of the first ones that was added, was the Jimmy Nardello frying pepper. And I like the fact that it was in Naugatuck, Connecticut, which is very close by. So this does really well in our gardens. It's very prolific. And I brought some seed that I collected from my own garden to share with you. This is Radiator Charlie's Mortgage Lifter tomato, which I was telling you about, a little bit of the story about how it came to be. He would take one plant, plant it in the middle that he really liked, and plant 12 other plants around it, and cross-pollinate and take the best of that, do the same thing, plant one plant, plant 12 around it, until he had what he thought was a far superior tomato. And he did a great job, because it's among one of the most flavorful red tomatoes I grow in my garden. It's very disease resistant. We had tomato blight one year, and it wiped out almost all of my tomatoes except for my mortgage lifter. It did really, 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 really great. They're big. They average 2 to 4 pounds. They're fairly early for such a big tomato. They ripen in just 80 days, so that makes them pretty superior. They have very few seeds, produce a very abundant crop. You're going to harvest them over a long period of time. It's an indeterminate tomato, so it keeps producing on and on until you have your first frost. Tomatoes don't like frost. It's a great plant. It's a great tomato. And you can see he was able to sell enough to pay off his $6,000 mortgage in the middle of the Depression. So people came from all around to buy his seedlings. And they were $1 back then. That was quite a bit of money. So it's a tomato I really recommend, and I brought seed along. And this is one of our favorites from our plant sale that we used to have in Foster. This is the dragon's egg cucumber. And who doesn't want to say they're growing dragon eggs in their garden? It is a cucumber that's about the size of a large egg. It's creamy white. It's very mellow and crisp. It's never bitter. It's very, very prolific. Children love it. It makes great pickles. It's very sweet tasting, very unique looking, and it's an heirloom that actually originated from Croatia. So it's a really, really fun one. And they look like little eggs in the garden. This is bronze fennel. Fennel is an herb. It's used a lot in Italian cooking. Now what I like to do with bronze fennel is, I do this a lot with certain plants. I have my flower beds, but I also tuck very pretty edible ornamentals into my flower beds. And bronze fennel is one that I plant all the time. One of the things I like about it is it reseeds, so it comes back, even though it's an annual, which only lives for 1 year. It drops seed, and next year, usually bronze fennel will come back for me. It works really nice in a cut vase, believe it or not. It's a nice filler with your flowers. Can you imagine like a lime green plant against that beautiful purple lacy foliage? It looks really nice together. It's a great garnish if you're going to be doing a salad and you want to put something a little bit different colored in it. You can add it to your salads. You can use it as a garnish. The seeds and the fronds can be used like any fennel. And one of the things about fennel that I learned when I was living in Germany, and that's where I had my first 2 children, is that it cures colic. We would take the fennel seeds, we would soak them in hot boiling water for about 10 minutes, strain the seeds out, and spoon that into my little baby's mouth. And my kids had colic, and it definitely helped with the gas. And also, if you're having a particularly gassy meal, you can serve fennel with it, and it'll help with adults as well. So that's the bronze fennel. And this is nasturtium. And nasturtium's such a great garden plant. The only thing tricky about nasturtium is it does not like to be transplanted. So if you're going to grow it, you have to plant the seeds in the garden where you want to have nasturtium. But nasturtium is such a pretty plant. And this is the Empress of India nasturtium. And this was very popular in the Victorian era. It's an old heirloom. It has really dark, almost blue-green foliage and very bright crimson flowers. I like it either in a hanging basket or as an edging plant. I saw somebody did a really nice bean teepee. They did a bean teepee, and then all around the edge they planted nasturtium. And so everything was edible for the kids who were playing inside of the teepee. So how do you use this plant? You can pickle the little immature seed pods and make pickles out of them. So you can take the seed pods and you can pickle them and make pickles out of them. The flowers are completely edible and they're a little peppery tasting. The leaves are very peppery tasting. So something that I did, I taught a class on flowers in the kitchen, and we made a cream cheese and we stuffed it into the flowers and served little cheese balls inside of the flowers. That was very pretty. You can also put the flowers into salads. They'll look very pretty in your salad and they'll give it a little bit of a peppery taste. You can chop them up and put them in compound butters. It'll give your butter a pretty orangish red color, and it'll give it a nice flavor. They're very easy to grow. They just like sun. They like a lot of heat and a lot of sun. Do you have any questions so far?
I can't seem to grow cucumbers. There are little bugs that always eat the vines.
Oh, that's a cucumber borer. And what you can do is when you plant the cucumber and it's first coming up, take a little ring of tin foil and put it around the base of the plant. And that'll keep the little borers from coming in and chewing through the base of the vine. It'll usually be the base of the vine, and it kills the whole plant for the rest of the plant, and then you don't have any cucumbers.
Another thing with squash in this town is, when it gets real large, it gets covered with the white powdery mildew.
Powdery mildew,
from
yes.
the humidity.
Right.
And people have said you could spray it with Listerine, and I've tried that. That does help.
It does help?
It does not kill the plant.
Okay.
But the most effective thing I've found is just to remove those affected leaves.
Right.
But how can I prevent it without adding chemicals?
Well, there are organic anti-fungicides that you can use. One is called Bordeaux mixture.
I know that one.
Yeah, Bordeaux mixture came up in the Bordeaux region because somebody was stealing this man's grapes. Yeah, it's actually lime and copper and I believe sulfur as well, so it's slightly acidic.
So it's not poisonous then?
It's not poisonous. It's even allowed to be used in organic farming.
I used to use it. There's a bluish-green bush called Chamaecyparis piscifera.
Okay.
It's a pyramidal, blue, feathery kind of thing. And in this area it's prone to rust. But if you spray it with that, it doesn't happen. Right,
exactly. It'll just sort of break. It's probably a cedar apple rust because that's in the cedar family. And it has cross hosts between the apple trees and the cedars. And so it gets these growths on it that almost look like they're from outer space. At first it looks like a walnut, and then these orange tubular sort of wormy things come out of it. And it's very striking, this rust, but it looks like something out of a Hollywood horror movie.
So, when you grow the seedlings, how do you prevent dapping off?
Do not overwater. More plants are killed by overwatering than by underwatering.
That's what I wonder about is, how to plant things and how to not overwater.
Well, a couple of things that you can do to prevent damping off disease is you can make sure that your containers are scrupulously clean before you plant. You use a sterile potting mixture because you don't want to have any fungus in the soil that could potentially cause a damping off disease. And you try to water from the bottom. So I usually have a pan of water or a tray of water, and I put my 6-packs in it. I let it sit for a little while, then I take them out and I put them on my shelves. Because you're never getting the foliage wet and the water's coming from the bottom, you're not overwatering. So you never leave the plant in the water soaking more than 20 minutes. Because that'll help you a lot with damping off disease. And you don't use the hose that's been on the ground, because if you use the hose that's been on the ground, it probably has the bacterium on the end of the hose. So it's funny. It's there. It's like a nursery. It really is like a nursery when you're starting seeds off. Good hygiene is very important to keep little kids from getting sick. It's also really important to keep your seedlings from getting sick. And there's nothing more daunting than having an entire tray of little seedlings coming up. They have their first 2 little leaves. You're all excited, and then you go out the next day and they're all laying down flat, and they're rotted off at the bottom. That's the damping off disease, and it really makes you feel kind of depressed.
Do they sell these heirloom tomatoes in the supermarket? I went to Shaw's last week, and they had a container of tomatoes. They were different colors, different shapes. Is this?
Those aren't heirlooms. Those are, it's funny, heirlooms are kind of catching on. They're a new thing. So they're coming out with hybrids that can be commercially grown on a mass scale that look like heirlooms. So they may have the fun colors and slightly better taste than, say, the typical supermarket tomato, but they're not the heirlooms, and they don't taste nearly as wonderful, and they don't have the history, and you can't collect the seeds, say, and plant them in your garden the next year.
Because I didn't know whether to buy these or not. I mean, I looked at them, and
they
were black. I mean, like dark brown.
Yeah.
I mean, blackish brown.
Yeah.
Some of them were yellow. Different shapes. Some looked like,
They taste pretty good for a supermarket tomato. They really do. If I have to go out and buy tomatoes, I usually try to buy the Campari tomatoes are nice and juicy and have a pretty good flavor. Or sometimes the tomato on the vine are okay. Or if they have the different colored tomatoes, I try those because you do get a little bit more of a flavor profile, but nothing like a summer tomato. This right here is Kellogg's breakfast tomato, and it was collected by a man by the name of Kellogg, and he added breakfast to it because it's a bright orange color like orange juice, and it doesn't taste like an orange. This is my very favorite tomato. Out of every tomato I've ever grown, this is my favorite tomato. That's saying something. It's a beautiful 1 to 2 pound tomato. It's huge. It starts producing at about 80-85 days. It's starting to get better known as an heirloom tomato. It's very sweet, but some of the yellow and the orange tomatoes are just sweet without a strong tomatoey flavor. They're low in acid. This one has enough acids that it has a very round flavor and a very good old-fashioned tomatoey taste. People taste this one. People who don't even like tomatoes like this tomato. So I would really recommend the Kellogg's breakfast tomato if you want to try growing some sunshine in your garden. It looks like a glass of orange juice, the color. This is the mortgage lifter, which I've mentioned twice already, so I must really like this one. This is my staple red tomato. It's the one that I go to every single time when I'm going to be planting my garden and I want to have a good red tomato. This is a good red tomato. I actually think Brandywine tastes a little bit better. Brandywine is like the tomato by which all other tomatoes are measured. It has some of the best flavor. Everybody's like, it's good. It's almost as good as Brandywine. But Brandywine tomato is not as productive. It's not very disease resistant. It's prone to cat facing, but I don't care. I will always plant it just because it tastes so good. But if I want to have a lot of tasty tomatoes and I don't want to have to worry about disease, mortgage lifter is a good tomato.
What is cat facing?
Oh, cat facing. Have you ever had a tomato that has like little brown ridges? Yeah. Little brown ridges in it? That's called cat facing. Oh. I guess they thought it looked like a cat's face or whiskers or something.
One of them did.
So some of the heirlooms are prone to that. and it's not that tasty. It kind of gives you a little bit of thickness in the skin, so that's why it's preferred not to have that. But I don't care. I'll still eat my brandy wines. And then I brought along summer savory. Summer savory isn't grown very much in the United States, and I think that's a sad fact. It's very popular in Germany. There it's called Beankraut, which means beanweed. And beanweed or summer savory, is fabulous mixed in with bean dishes. It complements the flavor very, very nicely, and it's an anti-flatulent.
Is kraut the word for weed?
Weed, yeah. Kraut is weed. Sauerkraut, sour weed, sour plant. So this is beanweed, and the Romans thought it was an aphrodisiac. So all the more reason to grow it and put it in your bean dishes. Then everybody will be full of beans. There's lots of wonderful basils out there. There's lime basil, lemon basil, Thai basil, you name it. This is one of my favorites. This is Armenian basil. And this is one of the herbs that I like to put in my flower gardens because it's such a pretty plant. Sorry, I don't have a picture of it. I just have the seed package. Armenian basil is, it has like silvery green foliage that gets tinged with red. And as you're growing it, you pinch back the little flower heads. It makes for a bushier plant, and it also keeps the plant from getting that almost like benzene taste, that really strong, harsh taste that basil can get after it flowers. It's a very pretty plant. You can use it in edgings. You can put it in your flower garden. Put a little pot of it right outside of your kitchen door, so when you walk past it, it'll release that beautiful basil flavor. It'll remind you to grab a little bit and throw it on your dishes. So Armenian basil is a really nice one. And I've got seed for my own. See, this is how I keep my seeds. I just take the seed and I put in little plastic bags. And I actually have a binder at home that has photo inserts. And all of these go into my binder in the photo inserts. So I keep all the peppers together in one section, all the tomatoes together in another section. I have the peas in another section. So this is how I collect my seed. I put them in little Ziploc bags. And that's the seed from one pepper. And that was the best pepper I grew that year. I always try to take the very finest pepper, the very finest tomato, because then you're improving your plants from year to year to year. And eventually you'll end up having your own little strain. Like there'll be Brandywine OTV, which is off the vine, or there'll be Brandywine Carolyn Meters variety. It's because these people have grown the Brandywine such a long period of time in the same place that it started to change and become adapted to that climate and maybe be slightly different than the Brandywine that's grown in, say, North Carolina.
So how do you dry them?
Well, with the peppers, I open up my pepper when it's pretty ripe, and I scrape the seeds off of the little ribs that are on the inside, and I just put them out on a paper towel. And when they're good and dry, then I put them in my plastic bags. If you buy shoes or anything that has those little anti-desiccant packages, those are great to keep and stick in with your seeds to keep your seeds nice and dry.
And about how long do they take to dry out?
It depends on what the weather's like. If we're having a hot and humid summer, it can take a lot longer than if we're having a nice dry autumn. It depends. It really does depend.
I have a question about the process for the mortgage lifter that you referred to. So he planted the best one in the center, surrounded by 12.
Right.
And then he would cross-pollinate each of the 12 with that one?
Yes.
And how does that work? The plant in the middle selects the hardiest strain from the pollination of
No, it
the
was
12?
just he would take very best plant in the middle and take 12 really good plants and put them around.
Oh, so improving it.
Improving it.
I see.
Just
Okay.
trying to improve the strain.
I see. Okay.
I'm not sure if it would work for us. I just take the best one in my garden. And your library is doing something wonderful. They have, the library here has bought seed, and they're doing a seed exchange. They've taken seed and put it into these little packages here, and you can check out the seed, take it home, plant it in your garden, and then in the fall they hope that you'll collect some of the seed from your garden and bring it back so they can keep the exchange going. So you have an exchange right here in the library. And this one here is black Brandywine. Now the black tomatoes have a tendency to have fabulous flavor, and I've never had black Brandywine, so I'm going to check out some of the seed and grow it in my garden.
Like tomato
Yes, yes. Yes, sometimes they even have almost like a little taste of salt in them that goes so well with the tomato. Yes, and the depth of flavor is amazing.
So what happens if you check out seed and you take it and it dies and you don't have any seeds?
Well, we hope that one of your neighbors does a little bit better and they bring it back.
It's okay. This is, we're not grading.
Okay.
You're totally anonymous.
Okay.
If you come back with seeds,
Can you
it's
swap
great.
with something else that you might have?
As long as it's an heirloom, so that the
Okay.
seeds are true,
Yes.
then
Okay.
absolutely.
And if you're going to be collecting, oh, this is something I didn't mention. If you're going to be collecting seed and saving seed, it's probably better to only grow one variety because otherwise you're going to have cross-pollination. So if you're, the reason that I had to buy my seed is I like to grow different varieties of tomatoes. So if I grew Mortgage Lifter and Kellogg's Breakfast, they might actually cross-pollinate and then the seed would not be true. I might have a fantastic tomato, but it wouldn't be Kellogg's Breakfast and it wouldn't be Mortgage Lifter. It would be something new. So if you're going to collect seed, you should just grow one variety. And the same thing is true of squashes, melons, and cucumbers. They're all in the same family. So if you're growing those together, you're going to have some cross-pollination going on. And so you might end up with a cucumber pumpkin cross in your seed and have a very strange fruit the following year. I'm going to tell you about, I try to give you a different variety of plants and flowers and herbs. The next one is the Chioggia beet. It's spelled Chioggia, Chioggia, and it's from Chioggia, Italy. It's also called the candy cane beet. And the reason being is that when you cut it in half, you're going to have this beautiful bullseye pattern. See that? So you have red and white rings, concentric rings on the inside of the beet. It's very, very pretty. It's very easy to grow. It's sweet, very, very sweet and mild. It's not as earthy tasting as some of the dark red beets. I like it to slice very thin in salads. But also you can cook it. It doesn't bleed as much as red beets. You just have to be careful when you wash it and scrub it that you don't nick the skin. And if you add a little lemon juice or a little vinegar to the water, it helps keep the colors from fading. So that's a good thing to do when you're cooking beets. I think we have seed for this one. I just didn't get to it. This is a purple potted pole bean. Try saying that 10 times fast. The purple potted pole bean is a great garden plant. It's very prolific, and because it's a pole bean, it's actually a space saver in your garden because you put 3 poles in the ground, you tie them at the top about 6 feet up. So get some bamboo stakes or whatever you happen to be laying around and put 3 stakes in the ground, plant a bean at the bottom of each stake or 2, see if they get growing. You let 1 vine go up each stake, like a little teepee, and you'll have a 6-foot tall plant that has really beautiful pinky purple flowers on it, and then it'll start getting beans. Now, one of the things that happens with beans is we leave them on the plant too long because they're green, they're under the leaves, we don't see them, they get big, thick, and stringy, and they're not very flavorful. The nice thing with the purple potted pole beans is you see them right away. They're dark purple, a really dark, like lavender purple, and they stand out really well against the foliage. So you see your beans, they're easier to harvest when they're smaller. You should harvest them around 4 to 5 inches. That's the most tender age for snap beans. And when you cook them, as soon as they're cooked, they turn light green. So I like foods that tell me when I've done a good job. So if you're cooking your purple potted pole beans, the minute they turn light green, you can take them off, they're cooked, they're all done, and you're not going to overcook them. So that's a really fun, great plant. It's great for beginner gardeners, it's great for beginner cooks as well. How many of you have tried kale? It is like the super vegetable. It's in everything now. Kale pesto, kale pasta, kale everything. I've grown different kales before. My very favorite kale is lancenato. It's also known as Tuscan, black palm, or dinosaur kale. And it grows pretty tall. It grows about this tall, It's a cross between a cabbage and a kale. So the leaves have a nice substance to them. They're deeply savoyed, like a spinach almost, with all the like little puckers in them. They're tender, they're sweet, and I will tell you a great recipe. They grow like, the leaves grow like the fronds on a palm tree. So you pick a couple off, you hold onto the leaf, you strip the tender leaf off the center spine, you put that in a bowl, and you massage your kale. Now, kale can be kind of tough and not very delicious. It can be a little hard to digest, but if you put it in the bowl and you massage your kale, it softens up really nicely. And then you take a mortar and pestle and you pound a little garlic with salt. You add a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of lemon juice. You pour that over your kale, shave some Parmesan on it, and you have a lovely salad. It also it's also really good in soups because of the thick texture. It holds up really well in the soups if you're going to make a soup. You could also make kale chips, a more nutritious version of potato chips, and they're really tasty. Dinosaur kale or Tuscan kale or black palm kale or lancenato is very sweet and tender. It's got dark, nutritious greens, which can be eaten raw in salad, cooked in soups, or made into chips. It's vigorous and pest resistant, and I think out of all of the kales, it's the best tasting. It's the sweetest. And I'll tell you, it has to be good for you because we raise heritage livestock and we have heritage rabbits, and the leaves that are kind of maybe a little ratty or got eaten by some insects, we pick those and we feed them to the rabbits. And we have found the rabbits that eat the kale grow a third larger and faster than the rabbits that don't get the kale. So I know it's good for you. At least it's good for rabbits. This is watermelon radish. Watermelon radish is so pretty. Everybody should be growing watermelon radish. First of all, radishes are incredibly easy to grow. It's the first vegetable every child grows. There's an 18-day radish that you can plant the seed and harvest the radish in 18 days. This is the watermelon radish. It's about the size of an apple when you harvest it. And it's green and white on the outside, a little bit like a watermelon rind. And on the inside, it is a bright pink red color. It is so satisfying to cut open one of these. And we just shave it thin and put it in salad, or we cut it into matchsticks, or we cut it into little cubes and we saute it. It's very good sauteed. And we also roast it, just like a potato or roasted vegetables like roasted carrots and turnips and watermelon radish. It's not, you know, the red radishes in the grocery store are peppery and they have that bite. It's not like that at all. It's sweet and it's tender and it's like the sugar sort of caramelized when you roast them. Really worth growing, worth eating, worth looking for in a farmer's market.
Can I go back to tomatoes?
Yes.
Okay, so you know, in this town we suffer from tomato blight.
Yes.
Blight. Would Bordeaux mixture counteract that?
It would help. The Bordeaux mixture would definitely help, and it would also help to grow tomato blight resistant ones like the mortgage lifter would do better for you. Okay. Well, I already talked about the Kellogg's breakfast tomato, but let's see if I forgot anything. It's an old heirloom from West Virginia. It does have incredible flavor. It's starting to get some of the recognition that I think it definitely deserves. Sunset Magazine picked it as their top heirloom tomato. And Carolyn Mail, who grows a lot of tomatoes and wrote a book, 101 Heirloom Tomatoes, really likes it as well.
So it grows all over the country?
It does. It grows all over the country. It grows really well in New England, even though it's from West Virginia. And if I've convinced you to try some heirlooms and you want to buy seeds, these are some of the seed catalogs that I really like. Baker Creek Seeds, and we have their whole seed catalog right here, which has this beautiful glass gem corn on the front. Johnny Select Seeds is pretty good. They do have some F1 crosses or hybrids, so you have to look. They do grow organic seed, but you just have to look if it has F1 next to it, or if it says hybrid, then you know it's not an open pollinated heirloom. So kind of read the descriptions. Seed Savers and Seeds of Change, they sell almost exclusively heirloom, open pollinated organic seed. So, and just look at the variety. You want to grow them just to have the variety and the shapes and the colors and the tastes and the flavors. So we have a catalog right here in the library, and then you all are very lucky to have the seed exchange here. And we brought seeds in, and we brought plants in, and we brought some seed starting medium here, which is, everything's been washed and sterilized so you won't have wilt. And we thought you could pot up some of your own to take home with you today. Chris was nice enough to bring this along. Gardener's Supply sells these tips here, and you put them with a 2-liter water bottle with the bottom cut off, and you put this at your tomatoes. One of the reasons tomatoes get tomato blight is that the leaves get wet. You have to be very careful. My grandfather was a fanatic about this. There was you could only water the tomatoes with a bucket, and you had to go very low, and you had to water in a circle around the roots very, very carefully. And I kind of thought he was a little bit crazy until I went to my Master Gardener's class, and I found out that when you water with a hose, the soil splashes up on the leaves. The leaves get infected with the tomato virus or with the tomato blight, and that's why you lose your tomato plants. So my grandfather, I don't know if he knew about the tomato virus, but he knew that was the way to grow tomatoes. That was the way to water them. This is a very good way to water them. This brings the water right down to the roots. Your plant doesn't get wet, and you might have a better chance of not getting tomato blight. And I was talking to you about overwatering being the bane of your existence. Your garden needs 1 inch of water per week. So you can either keep a water gauge and let it fill up, or what I do is I put a tuna fish can out in the yard, and if the tuna fish can is filled with water, my garden's gotten enough water that week, and I don't have to water additionally. If it hasn't gotten an inch of water, I actually have a sprinkler. I don't have soaker hoses. Soaker hoses are so much better for your garden because the foliage doesn't get wet. But I actually turn my sprinkler on, and when my tuna fish can is filled with water, then I know I can turn it off. So that's the cheap and dirty way to water your garden.
You water your tomatoes with sprinkler?
I do. I'm really bad.
I have a very small garden and I'm a fanatic. So, and my tomatoes are my babies. So I take the time, but if I had a huge garden, I probably couldn't do that.
Yeah, I have a huge one, so I wasn't capable to go around and just hand water everything.
Yeah.
I do prune things back. We do stake our tomatoes and we prune them back, which is a great way not to have a lot of non-productive foliage. Because if you let a tomato go, it'll be this big around and tear the stakes down. But if you look in the branches of tomatoes, you'll see little leaves growing in sort of the armpits. If you pinch those back, the tomato vine will grow up. You won't have as bushy of a plant, and you'll be a little bit more productive. It's a little bit easier to manage.
Can I ask your opinion? So here in New England, with the short growing season, they say you should pinch back all new growth beginning August 1st, because whatever fruit is on that thing is not going to ripen by the end of August if you just let it grow uncontained. Are you harming the plant in moving sugars through it by chopping that off, or would you just leave it alone?
Well, I pinch my tomatoes back, but I don't pinch the tip back because it's actually a vine. And there's something called the apical meristem, which is the very growing tip of the plant, and it has a hormone in it that regulates the growth for the rest of the plant. So even though I prune back the side shoots, I don't prune back the tip. If you prune back the tip of something, it makes it much bushier, because you would want to do that with, say, basil. Prune back the tips of that, but not necessarily tomatoes. I wouldn't do it with a tomato.
Thank you.
No, no problem. And my advice for you is, say in a 6-pack like this, I put 2 seeds in each little cell, and when the plants start coming back, I basically prune back the one that's a little bit weaker, and I leave the stronger one starting. That way you make sure you have 100% germination rate. You have a plant growing in each and every cell.
So I have a question. We live next to the Stop River, and we have miles and miles of conservation. Hundreds of kinds of critters. And they do more damage to our property than can be told.
Mm-hmm.
I have planted tomatoes to come out and find, the plants, to find them cropped right to the bottom. And I don't like to use deterrents for that. Is there something organic?
Yeah, there are organic methods. You can actually hang ivory soap on the tomato stakes because the deer don't like the smell of that. Things will work. Okay, the problem with deer is if they get hungry enough, they're going to eat anything. But if you switch your deterrents, usually you can get through a whole season without having the deer decimate your garden. So there's organic things you can do. You can put human hair out in your garden because it smells like people. You can put coyote urine around your garden. You can hang ivory soap. You can get hot pepper spray, which is a spray in wax that you can spray on the fruit.
Coyote urine is not cheap, and I did buy it, and it didn't work.
I've always wondered how they did it.
Yeah. And human hair works good, I can say. Forget ivory soap. It doesn't work for my deer.
We had a lot
Your
of,
deer are probably used to it then.
yeah.
It worked really well at the middle school where I am. We put new apple seedlings out, and we hung ivory soap from each of the seedlings, and it kept the deer away for a while until they got hungry enough, and then they got used to the smell of the ivory soap, and then they went in and started nibbling on the apple trees.
I thought, one of those big things that they sell them, like they're deer stopper, or they have different names, and they are organic. They smell absolutely horrendous.
Rotten egg,
Right,
sulfur.
I don't know exactly what's in there.
Something on the azaleas that we have tried this past winter, and it seems to have worked, is milorganite. I don't know if you know
Oh yeah,
what that
that's
is.
human waste.
I would never have thought I would have ever done it, but out of desperation, because they did so much damage, I just took a shovelful and sprinkled it all around, and they won't
That's
touch it.
probably why they like it, because it's from the sewers of Milwaukee.
Yeah. They won't touch it.
I wouldn't put that on food crops.
Well, that's where I was going. Can you do that? Then I guess not.
I think if it's human waste, I personally wouldn't put it on food crops. I don't know how it's made
They
or
say-
maintained
they
or...
say- people have told me that you, because I wouldn't want it anywhere, but people have told me it's sterilizing,
Oh, okay.
so that you can.
Okay.
But
Tell them
conceptually,
what you read about the garden hose.
oh, I grow things in containers like 2 feet off the ground.
Okay.
We have everything, and they'll still climb up there. We have a badger.
Oh dear.
Oh.
We have rabbits that jump up there and everything. Like somebody told me last year, if you take a garden hose and make a circle around whatever you're growing, they won't cross it. They think it's a snake.
Oh.
And that worked.
Did that work?
Yeah, it worked. Believe
I
it or
hadn't heard
not.
that one before.
Yeah. It happened to be a black hose. It's nothing special, just
Mhm.
a black rubber hose. And it worked.
Well, I know not the deer, I know the horses on my farm spook at the hoses sometimes, so maybe there might really be something to that. I haven't tried it. I do raised flower beds. My flower beds are about a foot deep, so they're about a foot high off the ground. I do that because the soil drains really well, and you're always worried about overwatering. The soil drains really well. It warms up faster in the spring, and it deters a lot of animals from actually eating in my garden. I mean, I don't seem to have... I'm on 22 acres. There's plenty of room for the deer and the rabbits and the raccoons to eat everything. And we have dogs, so usually animals don't come into where the garden is. But last year when we weren't on the farm as much, I went out and the deer were grazing my tomatoes. I thought deer didn't eat tomatoes. There's a really great book for flower gardening. It's called Gardening in Deer Country. And it's an entire book of deer-resistant plants for the landscape and the garden. Unfortunately, if it's edible, usually deer will browse it.
Well, Medfield, I can tell, they get pretty hungry. They're not supposed to eat hemlock. They eat hemlock.
Yeah. Well, deer...
They'll stand there with it dripping out of their mouth. That's how hungry they are. I feel sorry for them.
Right. Well, deer will eat anything if they get hungry enough. They will try just about anything, and each herd of deer is different. There may be one herd of deer that would never eat a hemlock, and there might have been deer that sampled it here and found out that it was safe, and it sort of spread through the whole herd, so the herd of deer in Medfield go, yeah, hemlock's great, it's salad bar, let's go. So it's kind of different from community to community. And you'll find that in the summer, deer like to eat vegetation like the soft vegetation, the herbaceous stuff. And then come fall, winter, they switch over to eating a lot of the woodier plants. It has something to do with their digestive system and what their natural diet is. So hosta, deer think hosta is salad bar. We have Holly Ridge Nursery in Rhode Island, and what they do is they do a deer deterrent system where they give you 3 different deterrents and you rotate them. But you can do that kind of on your own. You can get one that smells like coyote urine, follow it with one that smells like rotten egg, follow it by another one. So you just don't give them a chance to get used to it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you know, that guy over there isn't spraying. I think I'm going to go over there. Everything smells a lot better.
Can you tell me how you prepare the soil for planting tomatoes and things?
Well, the most important thing that you're going to do, and it's number one here on your list, is you're going to get a soil test.
Okay.
It's $10. It does not cost you a world of money. It will save you a world of hurt over the years of gardening because you're not guessing. That soil test comes back with so much information. It tells you how much organic material is in your soil. It tells you, most importantly, what the pH of your soil it is. And then they also make recommendations of how to amend your soil. Plants like to usually grow in a fairly neutral pH. And in New England, we have a tendency to have acidic soil. In England, they have very alkaline soil. But here in New England, we have fairly acidic soil. So almost always you're going to be adding lime to your soil. So my soil, we have a lot of natural compost because we have livestock. So we add compost and compost and compost to our beds. You can never add too much compost. That's really good for your garden. Just about any problem can be fixed by compost. So we put compost down on the beds in the spring. We put compost down on the beds in the fall. In between, we do soil tests. We usually have to add lime because we're also composting our leaves. And the oak leaves have a tendency to be very acidic. But I don't plow. I never walk on my soil. So getting my soil ready for planting basically is just putting a new layer of compost down. I have so many microorganisms and worms living in my soil that they plow it under for me. So I just top dress. And then we mulch with grass clippings and mulched leaves. So we're always adding organic material to our soil. If you feed the soil, it'll feed your family. Feeding the soil, taking care of your soil is the most important thing you can do as a gardener. You're not going to have as many diseases. You won't have tomato blight. You'll have a much healthier garden. The produce that you get out of your garden will be healthier and better for you. You'll have a lot fewer problems.
Don't you get grass in the garden with grass clippings?
No.
No?
No, actually you have to be careful not to put it down too thick of a layer because it can mat and not let the water through, or it could be too hot and burn tender little seedlings, but I use it in certain areas.
I can tell you a rule of thumb about your pH. If you see clover in your soil, it's too acidic. So,
Or it's too compacted.
yeah, you have to, I lime every year because we live in New England with the acid rain, because I have to, and I don't see it anymore because I do that.
Yeah. You pretty much have to add lime every single year in New England. The only thing that we've lived on our farm for 10 years, and the only bought product I've added to any of our fields, any of our gardens, has been lime. Other than that, everything else is made on the farm. So just compost and lime, and that's all I really do. And I don't seem to have a problem with diseases. I don't seem to have a problem with insect predation. I do use insecticidal soap occasionally. If like the broccoli worms are all over my kale and they're getting much more of it than I am, I'll go out with insecticidal soap. But we've been a 100% organic farm for 10 years now. And we haven't had need of anything else. And we didn't set out to be that way necessarily. We were going to do integrated pest management, but we haven't had to use anything that wasn't organic.
Great.
I think preparation is probably, like I said, the soil test is the most important. Watering wisely is very important. Like I said, I had tomato blight a couple of years ago. It's because I overhead water. Soaker hoses are the way to go. If you can afford it and you don't have a gargantuan garden, go with the soaker hoses.
I've seen people take milk jugs and then they'll poke holes in them and they bury them, especially if you have a raised bed garden, it's easy, and you bury it and then you just fill that
Right.
and it just leaches out into the soil.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. And also milk jugs are so wonderful. If you cut them off, the bottom off, and you have the little cap and then the handle. In the spring, when you've got your tender little seedlings and we're getting an unexpected frost, you put that over your little seedlings and it's like a little mini greenhouse. And it'll keep them over a night without freezing.
Have you ever grown potatoes?
I have not, but we're going to be doing it this year for the first time. We're going to be growing them in a container. We got You know that ugly orange mesh fencing?
Yeah.
We got that in a stake, and we put the soil on the bottom, put the seed potatoes in it, and then you keep adding soil as it grows, and it kind of grows out the sides. And at the very end of the year, you pull the stake out and you open it, and you can harvest the potatoes.
I was wondering, I don't know if you know this, but if you plant potatoes and you don't harvest them, what happens next year? Do they?
I think they're annuals, so you'll just have mush in the ground, and you'll have dead plants on the.
Yeah.
No, I think they're annuals. In South America, they may come back and they may keep growing because it's so much warmer there. But anything in the nightshade family, which is potatoes, tomatoes, eggplant, they all have to be started indoors 4 to 8 weeks before your last frost, which for us is around Mother's Day. So this is a good time to start planting. And they don't do very well below 55 degrees. Basil especially. And basil's not in the same family, but basil. Oh, I have a fun idea. This is what I do with children. I was kind of hoping we would have some young families here. Plant a pizza garden. Get a round area and divide it into pizza wedges. And in one edge, you plant your tomatoes. Another, you plant your basil, your oregano, your peppers, and your onions. And that's your pizza garden. I've done that with kindergartners before. That's a lot of fun.
But then the oregano will spread everywhere.
The oregano spreads everywhere.
You have it for years.
Yes.
And it will come back.
Yeah.
It does come back, yeah. It's
Forever
come
and
back.
ever.
So any more questions?
Maybe, I don't know, how many people grow actually from seed?
I don't do it every, it's my schedule.
Right.
I don't
It
always
is
have time.
consuming.
Yeah.
Well, I can give you
A
some
little bit,
seed
I
starting pointers, and if you want to plant a couple of seeds, just make sure that the soil's nice and firm. It doesn't have to be rock hard, but nice and firm. You have good seed to soil contact. The potting mixture should be just a little bit moist. Keep it in a place which has direct sunlight. It's not so important for the seeds to germinate, but once they germinate, they'll get long and spindly and pathetic if they're not getting enough sunlight. And when you go to plant your tomatoes, if you're going to be buying plants or if you're growing from seed, you'll notice on your tomato plant you'll have these first 2 leaves that look different than every other leaf. Pluck those off and plant up to the first set of true leaves. So usually when you plant things, you plant them at the exact same height it was in the pot. But tomatoes will sprout roots all along the stem because it's a vine. So you dig a nice deep hole, you plant the tomatoes nice and deep in the soil, and you'll have a much stronger, healthier plant because that'll all turn into root zone.
Do you put something around? I put like yogurt containers. or
Yeah.
something.
That's nice to do because it keeps things from getting to the vine.
Yeah. Okay.
Try that with your cucumbers.
Yeah.
Instead of the tin foil. It's a lot easier than the tin foil.
Okay.
So if anybody wants to plant some seeds, I'm here to help you.
Okay.
The preceding was a production of Medfield TV.